Welcome to Around the Table with guest moderator, President Dan Bouchard.
This blog show is made available to you by QP Local 2544 for informational purposes, as well as to provide general understandings of the topics discussed. QP's Code of Conduct and its equality statement are to be adhered to at all times during the duration of the show. The opinions expressed on the blog show are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions of QP Local 2544, its affiliates, and any partners. The explicit intent is to have open forum and to express and discuss various opinions on a range of topics. Should there be any concern or complaints, please forward them to info@qp2544.ca. And I'll do a brief introduction of the segment before we turn it over to our moderator, Brother Dan Bouchard. The segment is about doing interviews with guests that are pertinent to the local and its membership. We're going to be bringing in guests over the course of this segment, over the course of this year, that will bring information and hopefully inspire a discussion by our members and participation by our members. So on that note, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Brother Dan Bouchard.
Thank you, Jim. I just want to say I love this initiative. It really excites me that finally we can deal with people and discuss topics with people about how things may impact our membership, being QP Local 2544. And I'm really excited with our first distinguished guest, who is a man we have a great deal of respect for. He worked for the Peel District School Board as a teacher, primarily at Streetsville Secondary School from 1985 until his retirement in 2012. He's also served in many roles with the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation. He was the district president for Peel in 2008 and 2009, and he's been recognized for his OSSTF work with a number of honors. He also volunteers weekly with the Eden Community Food Bank. He was first elected as a trustee for the PDSB in 2014 and is currently the trustee representing Mississauga Wards 6 and 11. It is my pleasure to introduce Trustee Robert Crocker. Thank you for joining us, Robert.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's a joy to be here.
Wonderful. So, as we discussed, we're just going to ask a few questions. We want to understand a little bit about you and how you came to be a trustee for the Peel District School Board, and maybe what your background is, what's influenced you to become what you've become today. And we'll have a very nonchalant conversation here, and we'll advertise this to our members and let them know who you are and what a trustee does, and hopefully they'll learn some things about you and what you do.
Okay, Jim here, and I'll ask the first question, Robert. Can you briefly describe or outline some of your personal history of how you became a Peel District School Board trustee?
Well, thank you for the question. And I guess I became a Peel District School Board trustee because I was a teacher first. And when you run for public office, you have to think a lot about yourself and your motivation. And what I found myself saying to people at the door was, I'm Robert Crocker. I'm a retired history teacher for Streetsville Secondary School. I admitted to that. And former union leader, I admitted to that too. And I still think I have something to offer to the education system. I know something about schools, and I still care about schools. So why did I become a trustee? I became a trustee because I became a teacher in 1977. And I worked for a rural board. I worked in what was then the Huron County School Board, now been reconfigured into a slightly bigger board, Avon-Maitland. And I was hired to teach history and later English at Streetsville, at Goderich District Collegiate Institute. In those days, teaching was much like it is today in terms of the relationships among the workers, colleagues, administration. The kids are the same. Kids are kids in any time, any age, any place. Some other things that maybe we'll talk about a bit later have changed big time. In my first year as a teacher, we didn't have a contract, hadn't had a contract, and by February we were out on strike.
Wow.
There's one thing I will say to your members. If you're taking a strike vote and it looks like you're going out on strike, and there's good reasons to do that, February's not always the best time, particularly on the shores of Lake Huron, because I remember a picket line where I couldn't see the school. I was in front of the school, but the snowbanks are too high. And we were out for 6 weeks.
Wow.
And we were out for a number of issues, one of which was grandfathering the retirement gratuity. And we all know what's happened to that stuff.
Yeah. We do. Thank you,
in
Bill
the next 40
115.
years. Yeah, there we go. I enjoyed greatly being a teacher. I moved from there, looking for some excitement to the Bahamas, where, again, I was a union member. I was a member of the BUT. We had T-shirts that said BUT on the back, Bahamas Union of Teachers. But really, they didn't represent me very much because I was an expatriate, and we couldn't go on strike.
Yeah.
But we had sick outs, for instance, right? Couldn't phone in sick because we had no phones, but there was no teaching going on because all the teachers were sick. So I wasn't going to get kicked out of the country for being sick. Was very, very fortunate during an economic downturn in the early 1980s when there were very, very few jobs around in any industry. There was an oil crisis, as you may recall. And it was very difficult for me to come back to Ontario and get a teaching job. But I landed on my feet with the Peel District School Board and taught history at Streetsville pretty much ever since. I've always been involved with my union. As a second-year teacher, I became a member of the collective bargaining committee for the local in Huron County, and never looked back. Never looked back. So when I came to Peel, I as quickly as I could got onto the branch executive, and eventually became executive officer, and ran for president one year and got that job.
Wow.
So I continue to be in retirement, a proud union member. I'm a member of the Canadian Council of Retired Workers, CURT.
Wow.
And I'm an honorary member of the OSSTF to this day. So I brought that with me when I became trustee, and I feel to its credit, the board generally does value the fact that I do look at things through a classroom lens. I'm not embarrassed about that, and sometimes I find myself explaining just why the workers might be upset about something that other board members might not understand. They may accept my point of view on that, and they may not. But generally speaking, I find that it's well received. So I don't know. Does that answer the question?
That answers the questions. And in fact, when we were discussing earlier, I know that when I first met you, it was on the picket line when OSSTF District 19 was on strike last year, and I just thought that was a class act that you would go out and check on the OSSTF staff that was picketing at that time. So good for you. I believe that Tim had a question for you.
Hold on. Before we move on, I just have a question. What inspired you to become an activist within your union, Robert? Was it one singular event, or was it something that led up to it? Was it the strike line? Can you describe that time, or could you remember that time where you said, you know what, no, I want to get involved with this union. This is something that really inspires me.
Okay, so there's a little bit of self-analysis here has to go on. I'm a preacher's kid. My father was an Anglican minister, so I guess I grew up with social activism. My mother was very socially active, member of the CCF, forerunner of the NDP, and so there was always politics in our house. She didn't work outside the home, had 4 children, and then after I left home, another one. But guides and brownies and political stuff, and so I guess it's in my DNA. I don't know. Certainly, as a student, I learned some things about working because I took a year off of university, and I was a framer for a year. I worked in construction, and that was hard work.
Yeah, sure.
It was very hard work indeed, and we weren't unionized. And, the guys in the shop were talking, and, the boss is making a lot of money, and we haven't been offered a raise, and, what should we do? And they kind of looked at me because I was the guy who'd been to university, and I was also the guy who didn't have a family and really didn't need the job as badly as they did. And so if anybody was going to get fired for taking the boss on, it was going to be me. So I said, sure, I'll go talk to the boss about it. Right? In all naivety, no training at all. Unionized workers are lucky to have trained negotiators behind them, but I had none of that.
For sure.
And I went in to see the boss, and I said, boss, the guys and I have been talking, and we think you're making a lot of money selling the houses that we're building, and we'd like a bigger piece of it. And I don't know what inspired me to say this or what it even meant. I said, and if we don't get a raise, just speaking for myself, I'll be going down the road. I don't know what that meant, but I guess it sounded pretty good. And the boss didn't fire me. And he said, okay, back to work. And he came back a couple of days later with a new deal, with a raise.
Wow.
Oh, wow, good.
It was 10 cents an hour, which was a lot more in the 70s than the early 70s.
Yes.
You could still get a cup of coffee in some places for a time. And some other enhancements as well. So I don't think that made me an activist, but I suppose maybe it kind of got things going. When you teach history, as I did, you're always dealing with social justice issues. You can't escape it, and so that sort of infuses who you are.
Yeah.
Certainly, my experience teaching in the Bahamas taught me that there was such a thing as job satisfaction, because I didn't really know I had it teaching in Ontario. Because you don't think about things in those terms until you don't have it.
Right, yeah.
And the schools there were terrible. It was not a good job. The schools were terrible. I went there with a 6-month-old child, and I wasn't going to have her enrolling in school. So in that system, so I guess that taught me some things. Certainly, I can tell you that when I became a teacher and parent and union activist, we were faced with a challenge at one point where a company wanted to come into our schools with a canned news broadcast with advertising and show it to the kids. And I fought that, and some other people fought that, and we got sued.
Wow.
There was
Putting your neck on the line.
yeah.
How much did you get sued for?
When you get sued, you learn a lot about civil law that you never
I
knew
would
before,
imagine.
right?
Yeah, I
So
would imagine.
we were 4 of us, including a man who later successfully ran for MPP and is still in that role, and another parent at school where my daughter went, and another teacher. We were sued individually and collectively for $900,000.
Wow.
Which our lawyer told us, and I had a union lawyer, by the way. The union paid for all the legal fees.
Really?
Would even have paid for the parking if I'd been smart enough to save the chit, right?
Yeah.
So what that would have meant was that if they really had managed to squeeze any money out of me, they wouldn't have got $900,000 out of me. But whatever they couldn't get out of me would go on to the other people, right? So we were effectively sued for $1 million apiece. Now, it went away. It was a slap suit. It was a strategic litigation against protest. They just wanted to shut us up. But I mean, we were right. I mean, I called them all kinds of things which were actionable, according to our lawyer.
Yeah.
You shouldn't say things like that if you don't want to get sued, basically, for libel.
Yeah.
But they turned out to be even bigger crooks than we said they were. So we were vindicated.
That's awesome.
So that I guess that maybe informs my interest in social activism.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's funny. I've always seen, I've only gotten to know a few of those trustees personally over the last few years. And I tell you, the parallel between trustee and activism, I find, is it's very parallel. It's very straight. There's a very big connection there. Tim, you had a question?
Yes, Robert. Could you describe your role and responsibilities as a trustee in the Peel District School Board?
Sure. Now it is on the Peel Board website, of course, for the dry version, and of course that's something that you just have to do. So there are, under the Education Act, defined duties that trustees have.
So we should link some of those, Tim and Jay? Like we should put something on our,
we'll put that
maybe
in
in
the
the
video.
description, right? Yeah,
Very
perfect.
easy. Yep.
Yeah, good idea. So I won't recite those to you, but I maybe be better to answer the question in the spirit in which you asked it. The thing that I learned very quickly, because the Peel Board does a good job of educating all its employees, including the trustees, who aren't really employees, but we work with the board, and we are the board,
Right.
that we're on the governance side. not on the operations side. So if anybody phones me with an operational concern, you know, and it could be busing, it could be my kid's been turned down for French immersion, it could be I don't want my kid to have this teacher, it could be I've got a concern about the cleanliness of the school, right? I've got a concern about, you know, almost anything. It's bound to be operational, right? In which case, my job is really to make sure that the right person on staff contacts that person to deal with their issue. I'd make a big enemy of any principal in the board if I were to say to a parent, yeah, you're quite right. We're going to find your grade 3 kid another teacher, or we're going to make sure that he doesn't have to sit at the back, or you know, or whatever it is, right? Yeah. And I'd make an enemy of Dan and his membership, I'm sure, if I told a parent that you know they're absolutely right. You know, I'm going to get after these guys about whatever it is. So we have to be very careful about that. So on the governance side, what trustees are charged with is the responsibility of determining board policy. Now, that's not something we do every day because the policy is pretty much set. Your members can see board policies and the general public can see them. They too are on the website. We tweak them. There's a trustee review committee upon which I sit. And, you know, there's some things there that I would like to change. It's a slow process. But I can tell you that as early as this week, I had a chat with the director of communications because I wanted to work with him about some ideas that I have about tweaking the policies. And I can do that as a trustee, and all trustees can. But we're not going to revolutionize the whole thing. Yeah. A great deal of what we do as trustees is not determined by board policies anyway. It's determined by the Education Act. Yeah. And of course, nothing that the board decides can contravene the Ed Act or the Criminal Code of Canada or the Charter of Rights of Freedoms or the Ontario Human Rights Code and the labor laws that your members would deal with on a more immediate basis on day to day. I see a lot of my job as a trustee being representing the board to the general public as well as representing the general public to the board. So I'm their elected representative. A citizen comes to me with a complaint. I'll tell you something that's fairly typical. There's people parking on my street. They shouldn't be. Every time there's something going on at the school, I can't get into my driveway, right? And they're right to phone me. You know, the same as your right to phone your counselor if your garbage isn't picked up or whatever. Yeah. I'm not parking authority. However, we can work with the principal and the parking authority if it really is a problem, and there's ways of getting things done. So that's something that we do. Sometimes I feel I'm kind of a cheerleader. The best part of my job is going to a school and seeing the kids. The staff always seem to be happy when the trustee comes in. If they're not happy, they're faking it really well. And it's an opportunity for me to say nice things about the school, which happen to be true, because it's a lot of fun seeing those kindergarten kids in action. And kindergarten classes aren't like they were in our time, I can tell you.
No, they're much different.
In fact, there's been a lot of changes, particularly at the elementary level. I'll tell you as well that I do try to seek out the custodial staff at the school and compliment them on the way the building looks, because 99.9% of the time, I'm telling the truth if I say, school looks great. Yeah. Because they're doing a job, and I think that needs to be said.
Well, thank you for that. We appreciate it for sure, yeah.
One more follow-up question there, Robert. Do you receive requests around concerns around budgets?
Yes, and this is budget time of year. So again, on the website, there is an invitation for input from the general public, which includes employees of the Peel District School Board. After all, PDSB is the biggest employer in Peel, right? Yeah. Which is something that I think about quite a bit. So yes, we do. Yes, we do. But the process is there on the website, and I'm expecting budget meetings before the end of the next month. And we will be voting on a new budget.
Beautiful. And I know the GSM was just released last week, so that's why you're having these meetings now about budget, whatnot, and what the forecast is.
Yes, because our staff can't really come through with a budget until they find out
What the funding
what we've got coming from the provincial government. And on that note, when I started teaching, and so when I was first on the collective bargaining committee for my local in Goderich, the boards had the power to tax. So if an employee group, whether it was QP or SEIU or the CAW represented workers as well, Unifor now, or the elementary teachers or ourselves, and the board said, well, we can't pay you, we don't have the money, we could say, but you have the power to tax. Because they didn't like raising taxes, no government does, but they could do that. Now, since Mike Harris, boards don't have the power to tax, and so I don't have the power to pay more money for something by raising taxes, But 30 years ago, a trustee like myself could have worked actively to try and talk the other trustees into doing that.
Wow.
What that's done is to take a lot of power away from boards. There's no question.
Yeah.
But what it's also done, and this is the part that I like coming from where I do, is it means that it's easier for boards to work together with employee groups, because in the end we all want the same thing. So there are going to be times when we should, as trustees, and you should, as workers, be lobbying the provincial government together for funding for the things that we need to do the job.
Yeah, and on that note, I think about Bill 115 and all the groups coming together and fighting the charter challenge, and ultimately we won that challenge. So that's a very good point.